This entire unit has focused on our country expanding, our new country pushing further west and expanding our territory. Well, this video is going to talk a little bit more about pioneers going west, but we're going to break it down into also how climate, so in other words the weather pattern for an area, and the geography, so the landscape around us, what role did those two things play in our country expanding and growing? Well, one of the first big things that happened for our country is we were pretty much stuck on the east side of the Appalachian Mountains. And there was a proclamation in 1763 that King George made for us to kind of stop trying to push past the Appalachian Mountains. Well, following the Revolution, there was this guy named Daniel Boone who discovered a route through the Appalachian Mountains that he named the Wilderness Road. So again, one of those first geographic obstacles that pioneers faced was the Appalachian Mountains. And Daniel Boone discovered the solution to the young nation's problem by following a Native American path through the Appalachian Mountains from what's today Virginia to present-day Kentucky. So you can see here on this map that you can go from what's today Virginia, starting here by Roanoke, okay, not the Roanoke colony that we studied, but you would go down along here through the Appalachian Mountains. You can see this physical map also has the different coloration for the elevation there, that you would go through the Appalachian Mountains and you would be able to go in to right by what's today Kentucky and Tennessee. And a very important part of that wilderness trail, you can see highlighted here, was something called the Cumberland Gap. So even within the Appalachian Mountains you got this far, there was a huge ridge of mountains that were called the Cumberland Mountain Ridge. But fortunately, there was one gap in it, called the Cumberland Gap, that again the road could go through to get all the way past the Appalachian Mountains. And this allowed thousands of pioneers to start traveling west through this wilderness road. And one fun fact for you, I'm sure many of you are familiar with stories of Dracula in Transylvania, but Transylvania literally means land through the woods. So there was a Transylvania company that paid for Boone's Trail. So the territory and a lot of area in what's today Kentucky and Tennessee, kind of what I'm outlining here with the mouse, that land was almost known as the state of Transylvania. Alright, the next thing that really had a major impact on our growing country and was directly related to climate and geography was the Louisiana Purchase itself. So this territory that doubled what was the U.S. land at the time, the whole reason we bought the territory was because of geography. So our country relied greatly on the use of the Mississippi River for trade. So we had just learned about how the steamboat played a huge role in increasing trade, and that was one of our main modes of boosting our economy, was following that Mississippi River. At the time, France was going through their own revolution. An emperor named Napoleon Bonaparte had rose to power and was trying to take over parts of Europe. And he was actually threatening us as well, that he was going to take away our use of the Mississippi River, even though we owned land up to the west half, and at the time France owned all of this territory in green right here, so they owned the land on the other side all the way up to the east part of the river. So Jefferson's solution was that he thought that he would buy the land so that we would own both sides, and of course that was a win-win. Our country could expand and we would have sole power and use of the Mississippi, and Napoleon was fighting costly wars against most of Europe, so he needed the funding as well. So for pennies on the dollar, about 3 to 4 pennies per acre, we were able to buy the Louisiana Territory. And the whole reason again was for the geography and the use of the Mississippi River. Let's talk a little bit more about the Corps of Discovery, so that group that Jefferson put together, led by Lewis and Clark, to explore that new territory. So the land just purchased was unexplored, and the geography and the climate was virtually unknown outside of a few fur trappers that had explored it for France. Now, the goals of this expedition, as ordered by President Jefferson, they were to study the Native American tribes living in the area, as well as the plants, animals, geology, and the terrain of the region. So basically, Jefferson wanted to know about the geography of the land and about some of the different plants and animals and tribes living there. In addition, Jefferson wanted the expedition to find a geographic waterway to the West Coast and the Pacific Ocean. So westward expansion and commerce would be easier to achieve in the coming years. So you can think way back to our unit on the Age of Exploration, where so many people were looking for the Northwest Passage, a waterway through North America to get to Asia. Well, even in the early 1800s, people were still looking for that waterway to make trading easier. That was one of the things Jefferson wanted, was to find that route, water route through North America to get to other lands to make it easier to trade. So it would make westward expansion easier if you could travel quickly on the rivers, and it would make trading or commerce easier as well. Let's talk a little bit about the role climate, the weather patterns played in the journey. Twice the Corps of Discovery had to pause their journey and set up a winter camp due to the winter climates in present-day North Dakota and Oregon. So it definitely held up their journey when they had to pause for those things. And also, one geographic feature in the way was the Rocky Mountains, the Great Continental Divide. So the journey was in definite danger if they were not able to trade for horses with the Native Americans called Shoshones in order to make it through the Rocky Mountains. Now luckily, Sacagawea, their guide, had been from the Shoshone, and her brother Kamawait was so moved by seeing his kidnapped little sister from long ago that he did agree to make the trade. But if it weren't for that, the climate, or excuse me, the geography, the geographic feature of the Rocky Mountains would have been a major obstacle and possibly too great of an obstacle to overcome for the settlers, for the Corps of Discovery. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the achievement. So what did the expedition achieve? Well, first off, they discovered that there was no direct waterway from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. So they discovered that that geographic feature did not exist for our country. They also documented over 100 new animal species and over 170 plant species. They brought back information on the size, the minerals, and the geology, so the study of the land around them, the study of the rocks of the area, the earth. And in addition, the expedition established relations with the Native Americans in the region, which was one of President Jefferson's main goal. And the vast majority of those relations that were started were definitely positive ones, with maybe the exception of the Teton Sioux. Alright, also the Oregon Trail had a big, that climate and geography had a big impact on the Oregon Trail. Basically, geography was the whole reason for the trip in the first place, that there was such widespread talk about how rich the soil was in Oregon, for people to claim that the land people could claim, it cost thousands of people, even greenhorns from out east, to try and travel on the Oregon Trail. So basically, in early spring, campers would flood the town of Independence, Missouri, which was basically the jumping off point for the route, and they would set up camp waiting for the grass to grow along the Oregon Trail. And essentially, due to the climate, it was like a race against time. The settlers couldn't start too early on the trail, because if there wasn't grass, then their livestock would not be able to graze and have food along the way. But if they started too late, they wouldn't be able to get to Oregon before the winter hit, and there would be no way to get a covered wagon through winter, through snow, especially once they hit the Rocky Mountains. So climate played a major role in when people would leave on the Oregon Trail. Another major danger that the settlers faced was weather. So they were traveling through the summer months. Have you ever, you think even in your own lives about summer weather, there's all these thunderstorms. Sometimes it gets really scary and the the winds get shaking and tornadoes and different things. So weather was a major hazard for the travelers. They would deal with thunderstorms, lightning, they'd deal with hail. Many of them were killed by lightning or hail that was the size of baseballs. So all in all, about 1 in every 10 settlers did not survive the journey. Additionally, so talking about climate again, winter snows would close mountain passes, and again that travel was a race against time. In the early years, before that Barlow Road was opened, travelers would have to abandon their wagons for boats and float down the Columbia River. Many lost their lives in the rapids and rough parts when they were just miles from their destination. So many had to try to get across those rivers, and many of them struggled with it. So after 1846, and upon paying a toll, the pioneers could then finish their journey by crossing the Cascades on the Barlow Road. And then finally, geography played a huge role in the type of homes that settlers would build. So if we think right here on the Great Plains, many settlers had to build a sod house. Now they wouldn't have bricks, they did not have lumber on the plains to use, so they had to use what was available, and sod was everywhere. Sod was such a blessing to the pioneers in this area that without those trees, without those stones to build their houses, they had to use the very earth that they walked on. So the sod was cheap, it was easily accessible, and it actually provided very good insulation for them. So these sod houses were a great example of the role that geography played on the movement and the activity for settlers in this area. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of the role that geography played and the role that climate played in affecting our settlers and the way that they moved and how and where they settled. So thank you for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.